And like, what's the consumer relationship like? Because I feel like um, California consumers might get a stereotype of like they only shop at Whole Foods, they only eat organic, and so you guys are
Yes.
in such a really good position. Like, what's the relationship right now between consumers and farmers in California?
Yeah, this is such a great question, and I think the short answer is that it really depends.
Hmm.
I I love California. I'm a native Californian, right? But I do think that sometimes there is a little disconnect between California consumers and their relationship with food and their perception of other people in other states and their relationship with food. It's easy for a Californian to say, I want to only shop and buy local because California
Hmm.
produces everything, right? We have the fresh fruits, we have the fresh vegetables, we have year long seasons of these things readily available. But I think that the consumer, the California consumer that expects that you're only a good person if you support your local farmer, well, they've never lived in rural Nebraska in the winter. Okay, try getting a local head of lettuce in Nebraska in the winter. I think that there's a little bit of disconnect there. And I think that across the board, especially when it comes to marketing around food, I think that a lot of times, in my opinion, wrongfully so, we attach morality to food and thinking I'm a good person because I eat these kinds of food, or I'm a good person because I
Mm.
support these kinds of operations. And personally, in my opinion, I don't think that food is a moral thing. I don't think that we need to food shame people for where they buy their food or what foods they eat. I don't think that's actually productive. Um, but I think when it comes to the California consumer, yes, there are those that have a little bit more disposable income that are closer to places where they can find those specialty foods. However, in general, I still think that overall, generally speaking about consumers, even in California, at the end of the day, most people buy foods based on their price points and their taste. And that's for me. I'm kind of a little all over the place, right? Behind my camera here is my garden that I grew myself this year. So I love garden fresh vegetables that I grew. I also like to go to my local farmers market because I live in a place where we have year-long farmers markets, but I
Mm.
also like to go and buy food at the grocery store, conventional, inexpensive food. I still buy canned foods, I buy frozen foods, I buy organic, I buy conventional. At the end of the day, I'm kind of just buying foods that I enjoy that also fit my budget, and I think while some people like to say they only shop at certain places or only like to eat certain foods, sometimes what they say or their perception of how they choose foods isn't always the same as where they actually spend their dollars, if that makes sense.
No, that does. And that's a really good point you brought up. Like California can grow stuff year round, basically. And other states like Minnesota, Massachusetts,
Mhm.
Florida, like you can't really do that. And so, like people in California, are like, well, why don't they just buy local? Like you can't really do that in different parts of the country. That's
Yeah.
that's really interesting because I mean, it's not very often that I feel like like I'm in Florida. I don't really ask how consumers in Washington State go about it, like how they buy local.
Right.
Which that's a really interesting perspective. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay. I was recently at a Nebraska Women in Ag conference and I was speaking, and one of the women got on stage after me. She's a registered dietitian, and she was talking about simple ways to make some adjustments to just have more nutrient dense foods. And she was talking
Mm.
about field meals and things of that nature. And I was sitting there so fascinated because she was talking about it was the middle of winter. Of course, I only go to the Midwest in the middle of winter because that's when farmers can actually attend conferences for me to speak at. And so she was talking about ways that you can incorporate more fruits and vegetables. And she was talking a lot about canned fruits and canned vegetables and how hard it is to go to the store and find anything fresh that's not a banana in her grocery store. And it was such a good reminder to me that when we talk about food, especially if you are from a place that has it abundantly and readily and freshly available in my backyard, right? Our community grows fruits and vegetables year round. It's important that we remember that accessibility is not the same everywhere.
Mm, accurate. Yeah. I mean, even I interviewed somebody from, I believe, Nashville like a couple of years ago, and they were talking about the concepts of food deserts and how that's a
Yes.
huge issue here in the United States. And nobody really realizes it. Like, if you're in an urban
Mhm.
area, the freshest produce a lot of people can get because they can't take the bus, they don't have a car. It's going to a corner store where they only have
Right.
bananas, apples, and that's it. Like, everything else is frozen, it's canned. It's wild. So the accessibility is a huge issue that not a lot of people are realizing, until we go out of our spaces and we realize that, food is not equal access like around the country, which is wild.
Absolutely. Absolutely.